This week in the field, a recap of the themes that emerged during the San Diego Coastlines workshop. Hi everyone, Scott Davenport here. Welcome to In the Field. Thanks for joining me today. I just finished up a San Diego Coastlines workshop, and I mean just finished up. A couple of hours ago was our final goodbyes. Had 4 fantastic photographers. We spent 4 days along the San Diego coast. Pardon my voice, it's a little gruff after trying to speak louder than the ocean for several days, which is really a losing proposition. I thought I would sit down and cover the several themes that emerged during the workshop, so let's go through them. The first theme is working with filters and calculating a longer exposure. And when you're working with seascapes, the way I like to approach them is to think about what my target duration of a shot's going to be. Like, what's my long exposure? Is it going to be, a quarter of a second? Is it going to be 5 minutes? What's the range there? A good rule of thumb for seascapes, if you're looking to get the fingers of water, is trying to dial in around 1/2 of a second. Now, how do we get there? Well, first we need to meter the scene without any filters. So if you start stacking filters on the front of your camera and then try to have the camera figure out, how long to stay open, it's going to get confused because not enough light's coming into the camera. It can't figure out, what is in the scene, and therefore the metering system gets a little bit thrown off. So we meter the scene without any filters at all, and I like to select my aperture as my main guide for letting the camera meter. Now you can be in manual mode, or you can be in aperture priority mode. That doesn't matter, but I like to choose depth of field first. That's my main creative choice for a landscape. Then let the camera do metering, figure out how what the base exposure is, right? Your exposure without any filters. And then let's say we're trying to target a 1/2 second. How many stops of neutral density filter do I need to add on? There's some nice apps you can get for your phone to help you with those calculations. I like one from NISI, and specifically the Australian version of the app. I don't know why. It's just the Australian version, but it works really well, and it gives you every increment of ND stop from 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 15 or 16. So you've got those individual points. Some other apps from other vendors, they only have the ND filters they sell, maybe 6, 10, 15. You miss all the things in between. And you figure out and find where is the right value to get me to that 1/2 second starting point. And that's a starting point. You will need to experiment with the shots because the ocean has a personality, and it may be moving faster or slower on different days depending on tides and many other factors. But that's a good rule of thumb to try to dial in that 1/2 second, get the filter calculations done, put the filters on, and adjust your camera from there. You may need to speed it up or slow it down. It's not surprising if you take a whole bunch of seascapes, throw a bunch away, and keep a few really nice ones. The second theme is that sometimes you can't capture everything that you want in a single frame. And what I mean by that is where the water is flowing and how it's flowing over certain rocks. The ocean has a personality. The waves do different things on each crash, and sometimes we can't capture everything. So a technique to use is finding that composition you like, planting the tripod, and capturing several different photos. And I've got an example here where I've got 3 different photos of this long rock here, and each one has elements that I like. If I go big on this one, this has a lot of what I want. Nice background. The right-hand side of the frame has got nice sweeps through here. This, splash over the front of the rock is cool, but it's missing things on the left-hand side. There's no whitewash through here. This is kind of a dead area without any interest. I move to the next frame. So same setup, haven't moved the tripod. I'm just firing away with the remote. Now I've got some whitewash going through on the left-hand side. And then third frame, this center part here is a little more interesting. There's some action happening at this rock here. This is getting filled in a little nicer. And maybe I'd even pull in some of the accents of a different wave crash happening over the middle of this rock. I can take all of those, put them into a layering program, and blend them into a single scene. So just creating a composite of the several photos. I have a different video that shows that technique, going back to in post. Let me look at the number. I might have been in the field, number 285. I'll put a link to it below the video here so you can go check that one out to see how the technique works and how you can put these types of photos together to create that full scene that you want. A third theme was sky versus foreground. And so some scenes have a wonderful sky and some scenes don't. And we had a mix of both during this workshop. And that's a nice rule of thumb for landscapes. If you're not sure how much or how little of the sky to include in your scene, well, is it interesting or not? And here's a couple of examples from the workshop. In this scene, here's the Coronado Bridge. The sky itself was quite interesting that morning. The foreground, there's not a whole lot here. There's the harbor, there's some nice reflections, but purposely adding more sky, composing with more sky in the scene. Now, conversely, if we have a morning where there's not too much happening in the sky at all, so this is actually even a healthy amount of sky. I kept it because of these trees, but it would not even be surprising to have just, the top quarter of the photo being, just for context, there's a horizon line out, but finding things in the foreground that are more interesting to hold your viewer's attention. So you can let nature guide you a little bit there with what it's doing in the sky. And if there's not a lot happening, don't put a lot of that sky in the frame. I'd say with the exception if you're using it as negative space to isolate some element that's reaching up into the sky, like a tall palm tree or, a lifeguard tower or something else, beach themed here. That same principle will hold for other scenes as well. Tip of the week is to take multiple photos of the same scene. That's going to be setting you up for success in two ways. One, you may get fortunate and that single frame will capture all the elements that you want in your scene. And secondly, if it doesn't, you have the opportunity to composite those into a single photo that does hold everything that you want in your scene. And that is going to wrap it up for this week's In the Field. Again, thanks very much to my 4 new photo friends for coming out to San Diego. I had a blast, and I certainly hope our paths continue to cross. And until next time, my name's Scott Davenport, and happy shooting.